It's funny. We accept the concept of birth, but we find it hard to believe the concept of resurrection. This is Jewish Life 101. Welcome to Jewish Life 101, the podcast where we tackle any topic from a Jewish perspective, from the way that a Jew would look at it. Today's episode is about resurrection. Resurrection is one of the 13 principles of faith in the Jewish religion. Although it's a matter of faith, what's the logical explanation for the concept of resurrection? The approach we're going to take today is from a spiritual standpoint, but nevertheless, you will not need any background to understand today's episode, and we will try to make it as clear as possible for you. Also, today's episode is dedicated in honor of all Jews that need any help spiritually or physically. May God help them, may God protect them. Let's jump into it. So in order to understand how someone could be resurrected, aka undo his death, we have to understand why his death comes in the first place. Originally in the world, there was no death. Everything that existed in a way that it was supposed to live forever. But by the sin of Adam and Eve, death was introduced to the world. What's the connection between the sin of Adam and Eve and the death that was put into the world? There are three different ways to look at it. The first way is that there's no real connection. It was just a punishment. They did something wrong. They sinned by eating from the fruits of the tree of knowledge, and God punished them by introducing to them the concept of death. The second reason has a little bit more of a connection, which is that through the sin of the tree of knowledge, good and bad were mixed together with each other to the point that there's nothing in the world which is solely good or solely bad. There's no bad without good, and there's no good without bad. The problem with that is that God made the world with the purpose that it should eventually become the dwelling place for God, like we will explain in a different episode. And if every single thing always has that little bit of bad in it, it can't be the proper dwelling place for God. Because the definition of bad is something which is opposed to God and his unity. It is something that says, I exist as a thing for myself. I am not fully and utterly just an extension of God. Like we will explain how that works in a different episode. Therefore, God made the concept of death so that these beings which have bad in them will die, and then whatever beings that get eventually resurrected will have the capability of being solely good, and then they could be a full vessel to receive God in this world as a dwelling place for him. The third connection between sin and death is that death is an outcome of bad. You see, like I explained earlier, something bad means something that denies the full and unified existence of God and everything, and rather says, I exist for myself. It's basically covering over this true fact of godliness and making it look like something not true. Now, since God is the only standing being with some actual importance to him, that means that he's the only being that actually has life and as a being that actually possesses it. Now, bad is something that covers over that. So bad is something that covers over life. So on a spiritual sense, bad is literal death. Bad is taking away anything real, anything with a real substance to it, or a real meaning from it, and it's covering that over. So that means that there's nothing left, and whatever exists is not something real. So how do we solve this problem of death? It's by getting rid of the bad, which covers over the good. Once we don't have the bad, which causes death, we'll automatically be receiving only from good, which is the cause of life. Now, the way that we would do this is by revealing such a strong level of godliness and his unity that you wouldn't be able to cover over or deny that and say that I'm a self-standing thing which doesn't live according to that. But we can ask a question on this, that if the entire concept is to have a revelation of godliness that's recognizable to us, this upcoming time of the redemption was not the only time that happened. There was also the times of the Holy Temple. What's the difference between the revelation of godliness then and the revelation of godliness by the upcoming redemption and resurrection? So to explain this, we'll bring an example. Imagine a crime, but not any crime, a really bad crime. Now, there are two approaches that people might take to this. The first approach will be, well, theoretically, I would do such a crime, but I have morals in place, I have a family, I don't want to go to jail, I feel like it's wrong, etc. So he's not going to end up doing it. His life doesn't live in a way we'll actually do it because he's too busy being focused on the positivity that will come out of not doing it. He's too busy being enveloped in good. Then there's the other person, which is the majority of society, which would think that crime, I would never, something like that, it's such an action I would never do. It's not that I would do it, there's just so much good coming out with telling me that that's not a good thing, or I have something better to live for. That's not a thing that I can do. I'm not physically capable of that. That's not a part of my life. It was never in my mind, oh, I want to do that so bad. No, I don't want to do that. That's a horrible thing. What's the difference between these two people? The first person has the concept inside of him, but he has other things which either contradict it or say that they're more important than it. Over here, by most people, it's not that there's something better than it. It doesn't exist. He doesn't see it as a thing in his life. He's not living in that realm. He's living with other things. Such an action doesn't exist in his mind. So his reaction to it will be that it's horrible, it's disgusting, or I won't ever do that. It's absurd to think that I would do such a thing. So too over here. That's the difference between the two levels of revelation. The revelation at the time of the temple was the type that the main focus was godliness. The main focus in every single being at that time based off the revelation. And the type of revelation itself was one that cared about godliness. It didn't really care about the existence of worldly things, aka of things that considered themselves their own existence. But it didn't negate such an existence. Such an existence could theoretically happen, but there's so much good that I'm living with the good. I'm focusing on the good. I would never focus on such an existence. I would never let that come to the forefront. But that's not an impossibility. It exists somewhere. So in other words, from this revelation of godliness is able to have the existence of some sort of bad. It didn't affect it in a way where they didn't have a bad inside of them. That there was no place inside of them which says, I exist as my own being. They never acted upon that. They didn't necessarily even feel it actively. But that still always existed deep down inside of them. That's also why they never had a concept of hating bad. Not so the higher level of godliness and the upcoming redemption. That godliness is the type which says that you cannot have something which is not part of God and His unity. Oh, this world exists? This world is part of the unity of God. Like we will explain how that makes sense and how that works in a different episode. But the point is that this world, it doesn't see anything that can be not a part of God. Every single concept, every single thing is a part of God. God is all there is. So since there's not even a trace of an existence of something else, it would find such a concept absurd. How can you possibly have the concept of bad if that's contradicting everything about me? Even if it wasn't contradicting, it would still be a concept which you find foreign. But over here, it's a covering over of good. And God Himself does not like this bad. So how can I possibly live with such a thing? Therefore, if you were to have this revelation of light, we see that there wouldn't be any bad. From the very fact that there's the reaction of the absurdity of it. And because there won't be any bad, which, as we explained, is the cause of death, there will not be death itself. Right now, as of the time of recording this episode, it is the day after Shushan Purim. There is a Jewish holiday called Purim, and the day after is called Shushan Purim. They're really considered 1-2-day holiday. And in Judaism, we like to add on things, especially related to holidays and special days. So we're going to start adding a new section at the end of most or all episodes where we take a minute and we say a takeaway from the topic spoken about. Like we explained in our first episode, Torah's purpose is to teach us how to live like a Jew. So every single thing which the Torah explains does have some sort of takeaway for us to live and take for our own personal lives. So what's the takeaway we can have from this episode? Seemingly, okay, fine, so we have big revelations of God, small revelations of God. Well, not so small, but both huge revelations of God, but one major and one crazy. But what does that have to do with me? You know, I don't have some sort of superpower which I can just make God do things and reveal God, etc. Well, that simple answer to that is number one, to a certain extent we actually do. That is Torah and Mitzvot. Torah and Mitzvot is something that draws down God into the world and shows, just in the very fact that it shows that this object, you thought this object exists for itself, but no, let's say a food. I made a blessing on the food. That shows that it's a part of God's plan in the world. I took this leather, I turned it into tefillin, and I put it on. I did the commandment of God with this leather. That shows that it's part of God's world. But over here, it's not just a concept of, oh, it's something that connects to God. Because that could be the second level of revelation. That could be the lower level of revelation. Rather, there has to be a capability, which is the higher level of revelation, where any bad in that concept is completely absurd, completely foreign. Now, such a concept, to live in such a life where anything bad is absurd, foreign, and because it's against God, who you would be living with in such a context, something you hate or have a dislike to. But there are very few people that live such a life. Even in Torah itself, it says that there are very, very few people that have such a mindset, that live in this full encompassing good. But on the other hand, the resurrection will be for every single person. So this concept has to be by every single person. Why? Why does this concept have to be by every single person? I don't have to be able to have this now. I'll have it by the upcoming resurrection, right? But the Torah tells us that every single thing that will happen by the redemption, that will happen by the resurrection, comes out of our actions. Now, if every single person is going to have a resurrection, every single Jew will have a resurrection, that means that every single Jew must have this capability of this level of godliness which causes the resurrection. But as we just stated, that's not possible by every single person. That's only possible by some people. Most people don't live this life. Even someone who's an amazing, upstanding person, he doesn't do any wrong. He still has a desire sometimes to do the wrong thing. He's just a good person and he holds back against that. He cares about God, so he'll do what God wants over what he wants. He'll give over to God's existence more than his perceived existence. So rather, the way that it works is not necessarily that in every single person, their entire life could be lived with this perfect, amazing unity with God. But there could be specific times in a person's day, or specific times in a person's life, that they're doing a certain thing and they're dedicating it to God. But not only are they dedicating it to God, at that moment, they're completely given over to God. Their entire mind is just, I'm doing what God wants. Their entire body is just, whatever God wants, that's what I'm doing right now. Let's say a moment of prayer. At that moment of prayer, they're completely given over to God. So much so that at that moment, no matter what would be disturbing them, they would never do anything against what God wanted. Because they're just too given over to something good to have any room for anything bad. What does this look like? This looks similar to our previous explanation of this revelation of light. The revelation of light is a type where bad just can't happen. So too, in this moment of a Jew's life, the bad is not a capability to take over him at all. And that moment is the moment of resurrection in his life. Why does that cause an eternal resurrection? Because this action recognizes and makes an effect above in the spiritual realms that are even higher than the concept of space and time. Now, if it affects even higher than the concept of time, then over there, when it's brought down, it could be drawn down not into only a specific moment, but it could be drawn into an eternity. So when he does this one moment action, it goes up and makes an effect above. When it comes back down, it can have an eternity of no bad, of just this pure recognition that he's given over to God. That is how we can cause a world which is absolute good. Yes, a world that we will all and everyone that we know that may have passed, they will come back alive. But more importantly, a world where there's no death, meaning a world that there's no bad. Just a world which is complete good, complete unity, and completely given over to God. Don't forget to follow this podcast, because next week we'll be having another discussion about the topic of resurrection related to this week's episode. Until then, I wish you an amazing, wonderful, meaningful rest of your day. We'll see you next time on Jewish Life 101. Did you enjoy today's episode? Feel free to share with a friend. Here at Jewish Life 101, we spend many hours on every single episode, and it's all with your support. Just click the link in the description to find out more, and we'll see you next time on Jewish Life 101.